Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another special edition of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. We have Mock Draft version 2.0 coming at you right now. And this one, we got a little bit more creative, I think would be a good way of saying it, than the previous one where we didn't allow any draft day trades, any pick trades, anything like that. We simply drafted as the board stood, and in this one, there were trades allowed, and the good old boys went through and made some trades of these picks, and then selected the players off of those trades that happened. I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex, but we're going to bring Good Old Boys version 2.0 right now. By the way, if you have not checked out version 1.0, it is available on its own podcast, full feature episode, as well as available on our YouTube channel. Make sure that you hop over there and check that out. Guys, we also switched up the order a little bit for who was drafting for the teams, made a little bit of a rotation there, as well as the fact that we added the ability to trade draft picks away. And that puts the Cincinnati Bengals and myself making that pick for them on the clock. And I think you're going to see that hold true to form. Joe Burrow, quarterback out of LSU, going number 1 to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Shocker.
Yep.
I think this is a lock. Yeah. I don't think there's really anybody who has anything out there besides this. If you do, please, hit us up, shoot us a message. Let's see what you got and be something a little different. But I think every person, whether it's via pod or mainstream media across all platforms, has Joe Burrow going to the Bengals. So at this point, if he doesn't go first, or if the Bengals don't make the pick, I think it's automatically going to turn everyone kind of on their head a little bit and at least put everyone's projections on tilt.
I floated a crazy theory to you guys in which Miami trades away 4 number 1s to move up there to take him, but that one got squashed pretty quick.
And that brings up a good point with this exercise, that we decided that you could make trades, but they had to be realistic. And, while we might get some of the numbers a little wrong, or, some of the compensation may not match up exactly, we still tried to remain true to what would actually happen, not like a crazy free-for-all. We tried to keep this as realistic as possible in terms of where we think, these trades.
With pick number 2, the Washington Redskins select the second most obvious pick that we have, and that would be Chase Young, defensive end / pass rush specialist out of Ohio State.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question here that 1 and 2 are going to be Joe Burrow and Chase Young, and they'll probably stay the Bengals and the Redskins. These guys are just two dudes that you can't miss. You can't miss on, and you hate to trade away that unless there's somebody's offering you the moon. But speaking of trades, that's where we get here at number 3. There was a report out there from, I can't remember who, somebody from the NFL Network or ESPN or whatever, saying that picks 3 and 4 are on the block. So we decided that we're going to play into that and have Miami trade up from 5 to the 3 spot where Detroit was picking. Detroit would get that 5th pick and the 18th overall pick and a deeper pick, we said, somewhere out of the first round. And with that 3rd pick now, Miami selects Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback, Alabama.
I like the pick. Obviously, it fills the need. Miami wanted to go get their guy. They didn't want any chance of LA sneaking in front of him or in front of them and grabbing that pick. They had the first round capital to do it, and it instantly fills the most important position in all of sports on your team. So you have him for the next 4 or 5 years at least to try and develop, groom, and turn that franchise around.
Yeah, and not only that, you've still got Ryan Fitzpatrick ahead of him that you can bring him along a little bit slower. You don't have to throw him out there week 1. Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. That also moves us to the 4th pick, which also got traded. Jacksonville moves up to the 4th pick and trades their 9th and 20th pick in this first round to the Giants, who move back. Jacksonville moving up to take a quarterback, Justin Herbert, out of Oregon.
And I think the important part about this one is that we know that the Chargers are probably looking at a quarterback here. So in order for Jacksonville, who would have been picking at 9, to get what we all agree, I think, is the 3rd best quarterback in this class, they have to jump up in front of the Chargers. And I think while we were going through this, it was kind of one of those like, well, the Chargers, lost their trade partner with, perhaps Miami offers Detroit something better than what the Chargers could wind up. And Jacksonville has plenty of picks as well, and they can offer something more than what the Chargers can offer. So, in this scenario, the Chargers get screwed out of a quarterback because they just don't have the same equity or draft capital that Jacksonville and Miami both possess.
Yeah, and I think looking back a little bit, the one thing that we may not be spot on about is the overall compensation. I think There's probably a 3rd pick somewhere in there that Jacksonville is giving up, kind of looking at the numbers about it a little bit more closely. But this is definitely a extremely possible scenario. And if it does, both Florida franchises, or 2 of the 3, kind of have their quarterback of the future. And then the 3rd one has the GOAT. Like, Florida is quarterback rich right now, boys.
The other thing about this, too, is that Jacksonville doesn't have a ton of cap space to work with. So to have multiple first-round draft picks, that's hard to sign, plus all the other picks that they have. So I think they're going to have to try and trade away, whether it's for this year's draft or next year's draft. They're going to have to try and divvy up some of this stuff because they need to work around, some cap space issues.
The 5th selection, which is now the Detroit Lions, trading back from 3 with the Dolphins, as we stated earlier. We have the Detroit Lions selecting Jeff Okudah, another Ohio State boy, but this is the top cornerback as far as rankings and projections go in the draft, and it's also the same guy that I happen to have Detroit taking at 3 in our 1.0 version. So they get the extra pick out of it, and they still get the guy that they were wanting all along.
And we have 2 Ohio State guys going in the first 5 picks, and then we don't have another Ohio State guy going for the rest of the first round. So, all right. So the Chargers, now having missed out on Tua and on Herbert, and having to stand pat there at 6, I could see, if this scenario does play out, I could see the Chargers trading back and trying to work with somebody to get some more draft picks if they don't get their quarterback. If that quarterback is gone, I could see them trading out. However, for this, we did not have them trading out, and we had them taking Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker from Clemson, which still fills a need that they have at linebacker, and Isaiah Simmons is a pretty darn good one to take.
This makes that Chargers defense so scary, guys. Yep. Like, Isaiah Simmons is an athletic freak. So, yes, it pairs up Desmond King, Derwin James, Chris Harris Jr., Isaiah Simmons, on top of the fact that you still have this monstrous defensive line led by Joey Bosa to come after the quarterback. So this instantly puts the Chargers on paper as a top 5 defensive unit to start the season. So I like the pick a lot. It gives them a ton of versatility on the back end of that defense, and it definitely fills a need that they were needing at the linebacker position.
The Chargers still looking that they need to probably make a splash here. Do you think that, having lost out on the top 3 quarterbacks, now look at trying to bring a big personality and a guy that can make a splash and maybe sign a Cam Newton?
I think that's possible. I think maybe that might have been kind of their thing all along, right? Is they see how the draft falls. Like, they have their eye on Tua or Herbert, whichever guy that they kind of like more, and not necessarily having the draft capital to move up to go get them, see who falls to them. If not, you take the best player available. In this case, it's Simmons. And then you can go look and see if you want a guy like Cam Newton or Jameis Winston, or try and sling a late deal in the draft for like an Andy Dalton if you wanted that type of quarterback to kind of go out. So I do think they have a ton of options here to kind of have that splash name. We just didn't have them. We didn't have it shaken out for them in this draft.
So that puts the Carolina Panthers on the clock with the 7th pick, and they're going to go D tackle here. Derek Brown out of Auburn.
I think this is a shoe-in pick. This might be the third most obvious pick of the draft at this point, right? Besides who we knew was going 1 and 2 with Burrow and Chase. It's the Panthers. If Derek Brown is on the board there, they snatch him right up. Instantly fills up the gap in the middle, is able to apply pressure from a defensive tackle spot, playing the 3 technique, does have the ability to go outside a little bit and kind of play on the edge, but mostly he's going to be used right up front and in the middle to help plug holes and help that run defense. So moving on from that, we have the Arizona Cardinals picking at 8, and they are going to invest in protecting their franchise quarterback, Kyler Murray, so he has time to throw the ball to their now franchise receiver, Nuke Hopkins, and they're going to take Tristan Wirfs, offensive tackle out of Iowa.
Now, this was interesting because I had Wirfs going to the Giants if they were staying pat at 4. And you guys kind of questioned me maybe a little bit on that, but I had Wirfs being the first offensive lineman going off the board. Now, we settled on that after a week of learning more about Tristan Wirfs, that he'll still be the first offensive lineman off the board. But in this scenario, we have the Giants who traded back thinking that they could probably still land this dude at 9. And then we had the Cardinals taking him 1 spot in front of the Giants. So I think here we have a string of offensive linemen that are about to get taken. We think, there's going to be plenty of them taken in this first round too. So I like the pick. I think Wirfs he's fits the bill. Big, mobile. That's what you want.
Right. And I think the Cardinals are going to go offensive line, and they're going to go with the best available there, simply from the standpoint that they don't want to see a young franchise QB and a mobile guy have to really, as good as Kyler is, moving, extending plays, and making things happen with his feet. I don't think that that's really what they want to play on is allow him to really develop into that next level NFL quarterback and allow him to really show and develop upon the promise that he showed in a very good rookie year.
All right, that moves us on to pick number 9. This is the Giants, who traded back with Jacksonville. They also go offensive lineman. Wirfs no longer on the board, so they go with their next best, and that is Jedrick Wills out of Alabama.
It makes sense. Again, another team protecting their investment in quarterback.
And running back.
Giants and running back, right? So the Giants definitely have more than a few holes to fill here, but this is a good start. You get that cornerstone, you stick him in at tackle, and maybe even with Solder coming back, you stick him right tackle to start. But he can learn under Nate Solder, get some of that tutelage of the ample years of experience that one Nate Solder has to offer, and then he's the immediate shoe-in to kind of slide over to the left side, whether it's after 1 year or 2, depending on how long Solder decides to continue playing.
Right, and then that's going to move us over to the 10th pick, Cleveland Browns, who there was a lot of discussion here between us as far as is Cleveland going to trade back, which is a lot of what we've seen happen in some of the mock drafts out there, and some of these other folks are saying that Denver's going to move up into that 10th spot, which again was kind of where we had landed on a team potentially moving up to do there. We ended up deciding that deal doesn't get done, and the Browns are going to stay here at number 10. They're going to select offensive tackle Andrew Thomas out of Georgia, again looking to protect a young quarterback that had to do a lot of moving last year. It was constantly under pressure, as well as the fact that it allows them to retool an offensive line and develop it towards a system that's kind of a run-first system that Stefanski likes to work with.
Yeah, new head coach, new offensive scheme. He's offensive-minded. If you're doing anything other than, and you'll hear coaches tell you, games are won and lost in the trenches. If you're doing anything other than bolstering your line, either offense or defense here, I don't think you're doing yourself a very good service as a first-year head coach. Like, lay the foundation, get the foundation, and then move on from there. But games are won and lost in the trenches. Get your linemen, get your line sorted out, and then move on from there. You got plenty of talent everywhere else on that roster. They got offensive talent.
I kind of had my hang 'em high moment with Andrew Thomas on our first mock draft, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Go check that one out. I love the pick. I like Andrew Thomas a lot, and I think he will help solidify the offensive line there in Cleveland. Next up, we have the New York Jets picking at 11. And the Jets, in our opinion, were kind of really hoping to get one of those offensive linemen to fall to them, again, to protect their investment in Sam Darnold. That didn't happen, so they decided, what the hell, we're going to go get him the best weapon we can. And for the New York Jets, we decided that was going to be Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama.
The first wideout we have off the board here, and it's kind of interesting because we do have a lot of wide receivers names that we're going to throw out throughout the rest of this first round, but to see Jeudy be the first one, I think we're all in agreement here. Like, Judy's going to be the first. If it's not to the Jets, Judy's the first wide receiver off the board.
I think that could go either way, just depending upon the GM that's making that call. Personally, I really see CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy as kind of that 1A, 1B, and both of those guys I think are going to have some very, very big careers here coming up. So I think it's arguable that he's the first one off, but in this scenario, absolutely, I think the Jets look to go that route.
Okay, so as you mentioned, Derek, we think it's going to be Jerry Jeudy and then CeeDee Lamb, or one way or the other. So with Jeudy off the board, the Las Vegas Raiders holding pat at 12 will take CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver from Oklahoma.
Yep, I think it makes sense.
Yep.
Instant guy go in, trying to mend the fences of the botched Antonio Brown experiment from last year. So they go and get their true number one to give presumably Derek Carr a guy to continuously throw to outside the numbers, and CeeDee Lamb has more than enough talent to be a legit one in this league.
So moving along to the 49ers, and this one actually holds pat to our first mock draft there as well, in which the Niners, picking in the 13th spot, take Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle out of South Carolina.
There was some intrigue here with this pick because the Niners, they have this pick. This is the one that they got in the trade that they made earlier this offseason. And then, of course, they've got their pick that they earned here towards the end of the first round. But this one was interesting because we thought maybe they could move around because they have these 2 first-round picks, and then they don't pick again until the 5th round. So in order, if you're looking at getting some better equity, some seconds, some thirds, maybe a 4th, that you could probably shop this pick. But we didn't find any suitors essentially at this point where we were very comfortable with anybody making that trade. So that's why we stuck there. And Kinlaw, obviously, they need to plug the hole that they have there on their defensive line. So that's why that makes sense to me, and I like the pick.
Yeah, and that was one of those two that discussing that really went through and looked at it from a standpoint of what have the Niners done and the identity that John Lynch and Shanahan have kind of brought there and what they've been looking to do, and everything that they've done has been building off of the lines, whether it's defensive line, whether it's offensive line. And with Kinlaw sitting there, we decided that they'd probably take that pick because the talent is real with this guy, and he can really do some very interesting things and help alleviate some of what Armstead, the hole that he leaves by going to the Colts.
All that being said, though, I could see the Niners easily trading this. It's just I didn't see a suitor. You're asking a lot there to get a 13. I mean, you're probably going to have to look at a first next year, probably several picks in the middle rounds this year. So the asking point for a top 15 pick is high.
Yeah, the only team, at least for 2020's purposes, right? The only team that has the immediate capital that you can think of would be the Minnesota Vikings with the 2 first-round picks that are coming up here later in the draft. But I don't see Minnesota doing that at all. I see them kind of retooling and loading up with guys of where they're at. Kind of moving forward here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are now on the clock at 14. The same song, but a different dance for the Buccaneers. They are looking to protect an older, wily veteran, arguably the greatest quarterback of all time in Tom Brady. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have Mekhi Becton fall into their laps at 14. and they jump on this to protect Tom Brady and provide him with a little bit more time to hit those 5-yard routes that turn into 35-yard gains. I think full disclosure on that, when we were doing this, we were also reading about the flagged urine test that Becton had at the combine. So we do have him sliding a little bit further than what a lot of people do. But, NFL GMs kind of get weary about this. They don't want problems. Given a choice, they do not want headaches in their locker room. It adds, a whole bunch of unnecessary questions and media time to their process. So that's kind of why we have him falling potentially from the top, inside the top 10 all the way down to 14.
NFL GMs don't want problems. That's like the best statement. They will look for literally any reason to not draft somebody. And I'm almost thinking now that that's how GMs approach this process. Is not, we want that guy. It's, we vetted that guy enough that we'll take him. I think that's how it is now. And I was going to make this point earlier too, because we'd been mentioning about some of these guys who can come in, maybe learn for a year, and then get out there and play, or not have to be thrown to the wolves right away. I'm not sure when this mindset happened. When did a first-round draft pick have to become an immediate helper for your team? Why is it that you have to have it's this narrative that has been driven that a first-round pick has to help your team out right away? If it doesn't, it's a waste. And it's can we just let guys develop? The NFL is the best of the best, and it's going to take some time to figure that out, to be able to adapt to that. I just never understood why there's just this reason that everybody needs to play right away if they're a first-round draft pick.
Plugging holes. I think the last guy of name that we can think, at least that I can think of, and if you guys think of someone else, let me know, would be Aaron Rodgers, who went in the first round, slid further down than what he's supposed to, but was able to sit and really develop behind Brett Favre before he took over the reins in Green Bay. And outside of that, I can't really think of any big name first round talent that you can say, yep, that guy sat for a year or two before he finally got his number called.
Again, we were talking about the Broncos, maybe trading with Cleveland, maybe not. In our scenario, the two sides couldn't come to an agreement. So the Broncos stayed put at 15, and they said, we've seen 2 wide receivers go. We'll take the next best one. Henry Ruggs the third, wide receiver out of Alabama.
This one's been widely prophesied, if you will. It's either Ruggs or Henderson that seem to be where most people kind of land on the Broncos. I do not think they're going Henderson for reasons that I've expressed in numerous other shows. I'm okay with the Ruggs pick here. Pair him up with Courtland Sutton, and let's see what Drew Lock has to kind of show when he has some pretty damn good weapons around him, right? You have Sutton, you'd bring in Ruggs, you have a Noah Fant, you still have Deshaun Hamilton on top of a now 2-headed monster running back with Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay.
With the 16th pick, that puts the Atlanta Falcons on the board, and the Falcons definitely have a lot of holes that they could plug with this pick, right? But defensive back being a need there, went with another guy out of Alabama, Xavier McKinney, safety.
I think this works for them. I think it fills that Dan Quinn philosophy a little bit. So he came from Seattle, as kind of everyone knows, but you had your 2 stud safeties in Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas kind of heading up the Legion of Boom with Richard Sherman. And this guy, Xavier McKinney, allows them to play a true strong safety, while Keanu Neal can really slide into that free safety because he likes to get up in the box. He can kind of go everywhere. So it allows them to have that extra defensive back hanging back over the top there. And he has the ball skills to really thrive at safety and cover those deep routes. So next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys picking at 17. And we had a little conversation around this one too, just because there was enough there's still so much talent on the board right here. Like there's a lot of different options that that we could be tossing around here. And I think the Cowboys finally rest on the fact of, you know what, we need someone to go get the passer. Like we believe in Jalen Smith. That all they keep saying that Leighton Vander Esch is coming back. Yes, they could go corner in this spot. They do have a need at corner with Brandon Carr, leaving. But we decided that they went with Clavon Chasen, defensive end out of LSU. He's a guy who's going to line up and they're just going to turn him loose. They're going to let him go chase the quarterback and try and be as disruptive as humanly possible.
I think initially I had started writing in our spreadsheet here of who's taking who. I think I did have CJ Henderson down because that's where we were leaning. We were leaning towards that cornerback, and then we kind of went back and settled on Chase on there. But yeah, I mean, there are several things that the Cowboys need, but I think we're all in agreement that they go defense here with their first round pick, whether it's a D end or whether it's a corner. That's where they're going.
And that was one of the things too that when we were talking back and forth there, because we were all kind of thinking that they go Henderson, but then you start looking towards the front office and who's making the pick, and Jerry likes to make a splash and likes to make, you know, kind of the sexy pick, so to speak, right? And yeah, those defensive ends and those edge rushers are always going to make a little bit bigger splash as far as, you know, capital and what they bring to the table than a cornerback will. And that's where we kind of, you know, broke the tie on whether it was Henderson, whether it was Chase on, and that's what it ultimately ended up going was Case on there.
All right. So Detroit on the clock again. This is their second pick that they got from the deal with the Miami Dolphins earlier in the first round. They're now picking at 18 here, and we went after having much discussion. And the note that I have here on our spreadsheet is the Patriot way. We went with AJ Epinesa, the defensive lineman out of Iowa. And we've just, you know, we also, I think we had CJ Henderson here, but again, with, I'm blanking on their head coach's name, Matt Patricia. With Matt Patricia being a Patriot guy, you're going to win and lose in the trenches. That's their thought. And so sure up your lines, and that's what we have them doing.
Yeah, I like this pick. It allows them to have some teeth on that defense. You got your corner that you needed to pair up with, I think it's Trufant now that's in Detroit. And so now they went in defense again and got a guy to, you know, disrupt the quarterback to hopefully throw up a couple ducks for these corners to go get. I like the pick. Most people have Espinosa falling all the way down to the Patriots. And so it kind of made sense, right? That's where Patricia spent so many years and so many hours of film study around Bill Belichick and kind of listening to him and them developing game plans that, why wouldn't he take a chance there and stab a guy that he knew Bill was eyeing?
Right. Well, that was one of the things too, because we'd even talked about maybe they go running back, maybe they go wide receiver, a little bit of that offense. But again, looking at the personnel that have a lot of influence on making that decision, defensive leaning type of mindset and everything that they've been looking to builds towards the defense, and Epinesa makes a almost kind of that perfect fit off of what it looks like they're trying to do there. And then that's going to bring us to the Las Vegas Raiders, pick 19, and finally CJ Henderson finds a landing spot here. And this kind of seems like, as far as his personality and the organization's personality, kind of have a fit here. Cornerback out of Florida, CJ Henderson.
If you're the Las Vegas Raiders and the draft board falls like this, you have to be completely elated, right? Like, you get the second best defensive back corner in the draft, and either one or two, depending on how you have them slotted, wide receiver with CeeDee Lamb. Like, you have to be walking out of that first round with your chest puffed way out. Like, you really think like that you did some great things for your organization. And overall, I think they did. I can deal with Henderson there. I still don't think the guy loves to tackle, but he does have the metrics to turn into a very, very good corner, and the Raiders should be happy with him for years to come.
And I'm almost curious if there is kind of a caliber player like Henderson still on the board, that maybe this pick was being shopped, but when you've got that still out there, maybe you just hang on to it and take it. I'm not sure that that's how, Chucky wants to operate, but that could be the smart thing to do. Now, we don't know John Gruden to be a smart man when it comes to these matters, but it would be great for the Raiders if that's how this played out.
So at pick 20, we have the New York Giants on the clock from their trade with Jacksonville earlier in the first round. And the Giants go out and they get Justin Jefferson, wide receiver out of LSU. And a lot of this was Sterling Shepard has been he's been a solid number 2 wide receiver. He's had some concussion problems staying on the field. Darius Slayton kind of popped for him last year, but is he, legit number 1 quality receiver? I don't think so. I think he's another number 2 guy. You have Golden Tate long in the tooth. Like this seems to make a lot of sense for what the Giants need to kind of pair it up with Daniel Jones and give him a true number 1 target to kind of hone in on.
Yeah, we went back and forth on this one with Grant Delpit. The Giants need safety help. They already, went offensive line with the first pick that they had in this with what we're saying. So we went back and forth with, will they go safety? But you've got a guy like Justin Jefferson that's still on the board. Again, I think they understand the window is small. The window is small of what you've got with a Saquon Barkley, with what they've got offensively. That core, you have a small window, so you have to take advantage of it. You have to give options. You have to have weapons, and so that's why we've gone offense there instead of safety help. Philadelphia Eagles. I get a pick for the Eagles. Wonderful. And I all of these wide receivers going off would make me think that they might be in the market of trading up. But the problem is they don't have a lot of draft capital right now in order to maybe move up as much as they need to. And the payoff for trading up isn't what it would be. So I still think they go wide out here, and I think they go Jalen Reagor out of TCU. They need wide out help. That's where they go.
Yeah, I like the pick. Reagor's a guy who can he's kind of that true in-between, right, between Alshon and Deshaun Jackson. He's not as big as Alshon. He's not as fast as Jackson, but he does do a bit of both pretty damn well. He slides right in there, and I think he easily becomes the number 2 target there, and possibly number 1, depending on Alshon's injury, and kind of see how Carson Wentz and Jalen can build a rapport to begin our 2020 season.
So that brings us to the number 22 pick, Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings have a history of taking both wide receiver and cornerback in the first round and really liking to do so with that. And that's not going to change. They've got a pretty big hole now with the leaving of Stephon Diggs and them trading him to Buffalo. So looking at it, we decided to go with wide receiver here. I went with Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver out of Arizona State. And one of those that when you look at the Vikings, they have a history of taking the guy that, not a ton of people are super big on, it seems like, when they go through the first round. And Ayuk's one of those that he's got kind of that mixed reviews, but he offers some good upside there because he can be a weapon as a punt returner. He's got that kind of speed and that kind of elusiveness to be able to wiggle through some of those defensive coverages. However, some of the the knocks there are really that he had such a late breakout. He was a 1 year phenom, senior season breakout that a lot of people are questioning whether it was a 1 year wonder or if that really was kind of the coming out party where the skills kind of all mended and everything kind of clicked, and this is what the new normal is going to be for him.
You got to think that whoever's vetting out Brandon Ayuk is putting a lot of time with Herm Edwards, right? Like Herm understands the pro game. He knows a bunch of these professional coaches on a personal level still. So you got to think that a lot of calls are being made down there, and they're having a lot of professional level conversation. It's not just a typical college coach talking up their guy. That Herm can really speak to the ins and outs of the NFL and what these guys are looking for. So I like the pick. He's a guy that allows Adam Thielen to kind of stay in the slot, which he typically performs better when he's in that position. So I do think that it's a win for Minnesota here. They find the replacement for Diggs, and they're able to find a secondary weapon to help them out in their passing game.
And to your point, Derek, yes, that they are dumb as long as Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer are running that draft board. They're going to take a player that they should not take, and that's their opportunity to do it. Fortunately, they get a chance to rectify their wrong in just a couple picks.
So after the Vikings pick, we have the New England Patriots up at number 23. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion around this necessarily. I think our general consensus is with Tom Brady gone, Bill Belichick is going back to basics. He's going back to build the most efficient, ferocious, technically sound defense that he possibly can. And with that, they decide to draft Kenneth Murray, linebacker out of Oklahoma. He is versatile enough to help them out in their 3-4 or 4-3. He has sideline-to-sideline capabilities that he showed off all the time at Oklahoma, and he has a great nose for the ball. So I think his football acumen is something that Bill Belichick really likes, and he just can't pass up the opportunity here to get the second-best linebacker in this year's draft.
All right, so we see that linebacker go from Oklahoma with Kenneth Murray. The New Orleans Saints get on the clock at 24, and they go linebacker as well, even though we kind of had some discussion of will they, try to give Drew Brees another weapon, in his last hurrah here. Can you get somebody to develop? But I think they do address defensive needs here, which they do have some defensive needs. So we say Patrick Queen, the linebacker from LSU, goes to the New Orleans Saints at 24.
I think if it plays out this way, the Saints just smash the yes button and move on. In their perfect world, I believe that they would rather have Justin Jefferson. I don't see him falling all the way down there. His stock has been slowly rising as we get closer to the draft. And so I think he's going to be a little bit out of reach for New Orleans. So instead of coming up with a kind of a running mate for Michael Thomas here to begin with, they sure up the middle of that defense, and Patrick Queen will allow the Saints to have that immediate signal caller there and to help run the defense for them going forward to try and continue to get the ball back to Drew Brees and Michael Thomas.
One of those that it makes perfect sense there, right? Like the hometown fans, if he's on the board, that's where they're going to want to go. I think they give the fans what they want, and he plugs an immediate hole for them. And this pick just makes a ton of sense. So that allows us to move on to the 25th pick, Minnesota Vikings on the board yet again. And they're going to go with the edge rusher out of Penn State, Yetur Gross-Matos. One of those that there was some discussion here about them taking cornerback and really kind of going that route. When it was all said and done, ended up deciding on the defensive end and addressing some line.
Yeah, so the Vikings, again, historically, they're going wide receiver, they're going corner. That's what they've done in the first round, and it's not really worked out to their advantage. So for them to go wide receiver initially to try and, make up the hole that they have with the Stephon Diggs trade, that's fine. Do what you got to do. But this is a smart play, I think, to go on that defensive line. The Vikings need some help on that line. It just makes sense for them to address it. And seeing this Gross Matos kid, I think it works.
Absolutely. I think he is a guy that steps in right away. And playing at Penn State, he's very, I guess, acclimated to the weather that's in these Great Lakes states, right? Like, so he can play outside in Chicago and Lambeau, and there's something to be said for that. Some of these guys really struggle coming from schools, whether it's the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or the SEC, coming up into a division like the NFC or AFC North, where these games get damn cold, guys. Like, everybody knows it. Everybody likes to see the snow falling at Lambeau and this, that, and the other. But this guy's acclimated to it, and he's in a position that he gets to come in and really becomes day one starter there at defensive end. And the sky's the limit for him. He has got a quick first step, and I think he'll continue to develop in that Vikings organization. The Miami Dolphins are up at number 26. And this was, I guess, a bit bittersweet for me. They are taking DeAndre Swift, the running back out of Georgia. And I'm going to say it's bittersweet because me being the huge Georgia homer, I don't necessarily love him going to Miami because there's so many growing pains that are going to be going on down there. But he does fill the hole. He's an immediate need. He's able to step in, and he's right off the top splitting carries with Jordan Howard, and eventually he's going to end up taking over that workload. He's a true 3-down back, and it fills Miami's number 3 need, right? They didn't love the offensive tackles at this spot, so they went ahead and took their running back, and this is Swift's landing spot.
Which is funny that we say that they didn't love the offensive tackles at this point, because we still have 2 left that we have off the board. But you're right. DeAndre Swift here, this seems like a no-brainer. This is saying that they keep this pick, and it's not the one that, one of the ones that they trade away for moving up. But, yeah, I mean, the Dolphins, they need help offensively. You need to put butts in seats. If you just drafted that shiny new toy quarterback, you better give him a weapon to play with. So it makes sense. All right, we move on to the 27th pick, the Seattle Seahawks on the clock. And we say that they go offensive line, picking Austin Jackson out of USC, which is not what we had them picking when we had no trades and where we were.
They took Gross Matos the first time around.
Yeah, so
they took the edge rusher.
With the Vikings filling the void of Gross Matos, I think that the line, again, is a place where the Seahawks will address, except for they just flip and go to the offensive side.
Yeah, I could see this. The Seahawks, they keep trying to establish themselves as being a run-first team and really trying to establish the offense through the ground game and through the running game. And this makes a lot of sense, them going there in order to really play into that identity. I don't have a problem with this pick, and I think it's very likely that that's what you'll see happen there. That moves us over to the 28th pick, the Baltimore Ravens. And this was one that we kind of went back and forth with a little bit as well. They need some edge help. They need some defensive line help. Decided that would be a good place to address that with defensive tackle Ross Blacklock out of TCU.
And we have here on our notes that we were kind of deciding, do they go wide receiver here? Do they take, Higgins or Pittman? But we settled on address the needs, fill the need at defensive line, and take Blacklock.
Right, and that's one of those I could have seen them going big body wide receiver, right, which is what both Higgins and Pittman give you, both 6'4" kind of guys. It allows for them to be able to put another red zone weapon down there, right? Like when they get in the red zone now, it really Mark Andrews. And if you look at the receiving core, they're all smaller receivers, fast, shifty kind of guys that can get down in there. But when it really comes down to, if you got 10 targets or inside the 20, who you throwing the ball to up, 50-50 balls, jump balls and let them go get it. And there's something they're missing there, but I think they stick with defensive tackle, and I think that they probably try and go wide receiver, second, third round type of deal.
Yeah, I like the Blacklock pick a lot, just because if you watch the film of the Titans and Ravens playing in the playoffs, they could not get any sort of gap control in the middle, and Derrick Henry just absolutely gashed them. So this helps solve some of that, right? He's a guy who's going to step in. You can easily plug the hole, move off of. He can, shake the center and go get the ball carrier. So he has a little bit of elusiveness to him for a defensive tackle, right? If that's even, a phrase, that we want to use. But he does step in. He fills that need for Harbaugh's defense, and hopefully allows them to maintain the ball carry a little bit, because when the Ravens got gashed on the ground, and it happened twice last year, they got gashed huge between what Nick Chubb did to him earlier in the season and then what Derrick Henry did to him late in the season. They got to find a way to plug up the middle. The Tennessee Titans, the team who beat the Baltimore Ravens, would be on the clock right after them at pick 29. And the Titans go out and with Conklin leaving, they have their biggest need, offensive line. So they go out and grab Ezra Cleveland, the offensive tackle out of Boise State. It allows them to fill in with Conklin's absence, a guy who can step in and probably go on the right side to start. And then he might honestly stay there. I don't know that he's quite left tackle material, but he is a guy that they can have on that line and should be extremely serviceable from the get-go.
Okay, we move on, and this is our final trade that we have of the first round, and it's Indianapolis jumping up into the first round, trading with Green Bay. We say that Green Bay will get Indy's second and their fifth, along with probably some other compensatory picks. But Indy jumps up in here, and they come in. The reason why they move up is because they want to make sure that they will get their quarterback, knowing that they probably tried to make some moves with some of the earlier ones, but that's just not going to happen. So they take Jordan Love, quarterback, Utah State, to Indianapolis with the trade from Green Bay.
Yeah, and we talked about Jordan Love pretty extensively at the end of our first mock, and that was one in which we didn't have him being selected as a first-round guy. And I'm not gonna drain this point, because I think I did made my feelings pretty well known, but I don't think that I think he's a project, and I think that's what Indianapolis got, and at least they've got Phillip Rivers for him to sit behind for a year before they really have to see what they get there.
Maybe even 2 years you're looking at here, but you at least with a first round quarterback, you have that 5th year option in control, so you can afford to have him sit and learn for 2 years versus the one.
And this is where I'm not a Jordan Love, proponent necessarily, but he does make sense there, right? Like, this is where you see guys come up because you want that 5th year option. You want the ability to control them for, the first half essentially of their career, maybe a little bit longer in the quarterback position, but just kind of how that goes. So it makes sense for the Colts to move up and do this. I actually thought that it was going to be with the Niners at 31, but they found a partner in Green Bay before San Francisco said, yeah, we'd do it. And here we are.
Yep. And that moves us over to pick 31, San Francisco 49ers, who we originally did have them trading back, but really didn't see anybody else coming up to get somebody at this position with Love off the board and with the rest of the QBs off the board. So they're going to go and address a need for them, which is safety, and they're going to take Grant Delpit, safety, out of LSU.
And I really think that the Niners are going to do everything in their power to try and trade this pick away. But again, as we saw it, they just lost their dance partner. Green Bay offered up a better deal for Indianapolis, and so that's what they did. But I really, really think that the Niners don't pick at 31 on Thursday.
Yeah, I think there's
if they do though, this is who they're taking.
Yeah, there's a good possibility of it. And the crazy thing is, we have the Niners filling in their gaps, right? At least on the defensive side of the ball, where they were already the best defense in the league last year. And hell, they just go load them up even more. They get Delpit to help shore up the back end of the secondary there. They took Kinlaw earlier, so they're rocking and rolling as far as their defense goes. And I'm guessing they're going to look to try and put something together. And I'm guessing try and get into day 2 somewhere, whether it's the second or third round. They're going to have to make some magic happen, but to try and jump up and grab a receiver at some point, because they do need help there. Deebo Samuel is not the answer by himself.
But think about how salty that defense was before, and now you just added those 2 dudes in the first round. Yikes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that leads us to the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Gross.
And with this selection, they desperately need help at the back end there. That is a position where they were continuously exposed, not only throughout the year, but in the playoffs. And so the Chiefs select Trayvon Diggs, cornerback out of Alabama, to round up the first round.
I mean, yeah, they need help at cornerback. I think, yeah, Diggs seems to be the logical choice here. Could go a number of other ways, but I'm okay with this pick. That they need to address the defensive woes, because try as you might, scoring 45 points every game is not exactly easy to do. So you're going to have to limit other teams.
Yeah, it's not even to do even with a guy named Patrick Mahomes playing quarterback for you, and some of those offensive weapons that they have there. So yeah, I think that if they're making the selection here, they're going defense. I don't know that there's linebackers out there that you really want to go after. Yeah, after all, with Queen and Murray and Simmons all being taken. Running back, I don't see them taking running back here, another need that they've got. And I don't necessarily know that they love their options that they've got with offensive or defensive line at this. But cornerback looks pretty rich right now because you have Diggs and you have Fulton still out there, in which they could go either one of those guys. And I think they'd be very happy with that pick.
Let's see how it shakes out on Thursday. I heard a funny thing that the GMs are supposed to be doing a run-through of how this thing is all going to work out. But what's hilarious about it is, will some of these GMs play their cards? During this run-through of this digital, will they actually throw a name out there? Will there be some savvy GMs that try to do that, or will they keep it strictly nameless?
I don't even know if they're throwing names in that mock, though. Like, I think they're just doing,
fun.
Sam Jones 1, Tom Jones 2. Like, I think they're just throwing obscure names out there. They're not doing it with the actual players, just to make sure that the picks come across and report to the board.
Could be fun, though.
That could be very interesting.
Again, this is going to be, we're in such an unprecedented time anyways. Get ready for another unprecedented situation. But this is going to be something else to watch, how technology decides to work or not work for 3 days for the NFL, a $1 billion industry, holding on to they were still using fax machines up until 5 years ago. So we'll see how technology works for them.
Yeah. Well, really, how pissed off are the rest of the majors right now that the NFL had the last major sporting event in the Super Bowl? And then the NFL draft before anybody else. Baseball missed opening day. NBA's playoffs aren't going on. Like, that's kind of where we're at. You could argue Daytona was the last major sporting event, because Daytona is a huge draw. But but just across the major sports, like the NFL, even through this pandemic, finds a way to be king.
It's very true. Although what was an interesting thing I saw as well, that this will be the first time in draft history that the clock is not going to be as rigid as it's been, and just playing into some of those technology snafus that they're planning for, that you could see it where a team is over the clock come Thursday just based on some technical issues. So that could be very interesting to see. Guys,
well, that's nice of the NFL.
Sorry there, Jerry. You don't get to make your pick. You ran out of time. Could you imagine? Could you imagine the backlash? Oh, that would be something else.
I can just imagine them doing a video teleconference type of thing, and then all of a sudden somebody just freezes and they're like, face all distorted as they're starting to say the name.
Or how about the Zoom hackers that get in and start throwing out names and whatnot? Oh, it's going to be so much fun to watch how they handle this.
Yeah.
Never mind all these kids whose dreams are coming true because they're becoming, NFL players and being first-round draft picks. But to see how this is going to play out is going to be just, I hope it's just awesome.
Magical, I think, is the word.
Yeah.
Well, guys, anything else you can think of for the listeners?
No, I'm excited for this. We're getting ready to roll here. We are officially in draft season. Like, let the fun begin.
Yep. And then as soon as the draft's done, you enter into rookie draft season for all the dynasty players out there. So hopefully your wishes come true for those of you sitting there with lots of picks in this rookie draft. But guys, I think that's going to wrap up another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Mock Draft Special version 2.0. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.